Welcome to the Smarter Driver Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rick August, and here we're going to get you on the road to becoming a safer, smarter driver. And no, my degree is not in driving. My degree, in fact, is in legal history, which many of you know is the study of policing, courts, and prisons. My expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic. Here, we're going to look at the fundamental conflict of traffic, which is collisions versus congestion. And we're going to look at the arena of social driving, the challenges you face as a driver, the challenges you face when getting a license or starting a career as a truck or bus driver. The car's all gassed up, we're ready to go. Let's get started. Driving cultures, the myth that I want to dispel is that driving in other places is different, or that wherever you think that you are, that people drive crazy or road rage, lots of anger, those types of things. Driving is driving. It's not really that different in different places in the United States, different places in Europe, and those types of things. Yes, there are some nuances, there are some differences to driving, but when it comes right down to it, driving is driving, and the right of way is always given. It's never taken. Depending, the fact that there are road rules, different road rules for different states and different places, it's essentially the same, and it's really not that different. So let's look at driving cultures. Is driving really that much different? We talked about that there are some minor differences at different places, but as I will show here, I get a bunch of different comments that people think that Houston, Texas is much more difficult to drive in than, say, for example, Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Chicago, Illinois, when in reality, I've driven in all of these places and I haven't really found them that much different. Even driving on the other side of the road isn't that much different. I would argue that driving on the left side of the road isn't that much more dangerous so long as there's traffic on the roadway. It is more dangerous for vulnerable road users, for pedestrians, people on motorcycles, people on bicycles, because you have to remember to be on the left side of the road, and oftentimes there aren't any other indicators on the roadway. But driving on the left is more or less the same as well. So for those of you new to Smart Drive Test, my name is Rick August. I was a truck driver in the 1990s, hauling freight between Canada and the United States. Became a licensed commercial driving instructor in 1997. Teaching mostly truck driving and air brakes. Went back to university, graduated with my doctorate in legal history in 2006 from the University of Melbourne. For those of you who may or may not know, legal history is a study of policing, courts, and prisons. My expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic. And in 2015, I started the online business based around the YouTube channel, and it's been wildly more successful than I could have imagined. I mean, we're almost at 1 million views a month, which is just incredible. We're approaching 800,000, but my goal is to get it up to 1 million views a month this year. And if you want to know more about me, know more about the business, check out the autobiography over at the Smart Drive Test channel. New video this week, lost in Barcelona. As you know, 10 days ago, I went to Spain, driving in Barcelona. I videoed my drive from the airport to the hotel in downtown Barcelona. And yes, I was quite tired because I just got off a 24-hour flight. And we did get lost in Barcelona. So we look at that. And eventually what I did was what we did a couple of times when we were in Spain, which was the idea or the thinking of being in Spain is you can't get there from here. We could see where we wanted to go, but we couldn't get there from where we were. And eventually what we did 2 or 3 times was we just parked the car and ended up walking to where we wanted to go, and then went back and got the car and brought it to where it was supposed to be parked, and those types of things. So if you do get lost, you do get frustrated, but you know that you're somewhere near where you want to go, simply park the car and walk to where you need to go and find your final destination. Comments. As I said, I get a lot of comments, a couple of comments. It's more difficult, more challenging, more dangerous to drive in Houston, Texas. Some say that it's difficult and dangerous to drive in New Jersey. Others say that, especially Europeans will say that the driving test in the United States of America is a bit of a joke because driving in Europe is more difficult. And I would argue that, yes, if you're learning how to drive, learning to drive in Europe is indeed more difficult. The roads are narrower, there's more traffic, and most new drivers in Europe are learning to drive on a manual transmission. So not only are you driving on narrower roads that are more congested, but you're also learning to drive a manual transmission. Here in North America, almost all new drivers are driving an automatic vehicle. They're not driving a manual transmission. They're not learning how to drive a manual transmission, which simply compounds the difficulty of driving. And then, of course, Germany is more difficult. They have a very rigorous driver education program in Germany, and drivers have to take classes, weeks of classes, and they have to take weeks of in-vehicle training. And I would argue that one of the reasons that it's more difficult, more rigorous in terms of driver education in Europe is they are deterring people from driving. I would say that the bottom line, and I would argue that it is very much deterring people to drive in Europe because there are just so many vehicles in Europe, and that if people can, they just have really good public transit systems, and if people will opt out to take public transit, then it's going to be better. But you should know how to drive, no doubt about it. All right, I put up this poll last week on the 10th of June about have you driven in other countries, and asked this question. 75% of people said, no, I haven't driven in other countries, which leads me to think that most people have a very limited experience of driving in other places, not only in other places in their country, but other places in the world. And as you can see, most 75% have not been in other countries. Less than 10% have been in other countries with family and friends, and only 18% have actually gone to, visited, and driven in other countries in the world. Roundabouts, this is one of the things that is in fact different. I mean, we are beginning to see roundabouts appear on the driving landscape in North America, and I get a number of comments from people, drivers, that they do not like roundabouts, which, as I've talked to you about before, I love roundabouts. I think they are awesome in terms of moving traffic, in terms of reducing urban noise pollution, and there are fewer crashes in roundabouts because there are less points of conflict. Now, these big roundabouts in Europe, if you do go to Europe, you will be driving in these big multi-lane roundabouts, and yes, there is pushing, but it's no different than driving in New York City. You're going to push your way through traffic in New York City, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Houston, Texas. All of these places are going to be very congested, and you're going to have to move through the streets and push your way through. And what I mean by pushing your way through is you're going to have to hold your course and go slow. Make sure that you're signaling, indicating to other traffic what you're doing, and moving to where you want to go. So that is a reality. Freeways and motorways, if you watched that video, Lost in Barcelona, 2 or 3 minutes of it is me driving on the motorway into Barcelona from the airport. Almost all airports in the world, the airport in Melbourne, the airport in here where we live in Kelowna, the one in Victoria, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, all of these airports are outside of the cities, and you have to get on a freeway or a motorway or an interstate to get to the airport. It's the same with the LAX. You're going to get on an interstate to get into Los Angeles. So they're the same. Now, one of the most popular videos that I put up on TikTok some weeks ago was about, why people drive in clusters on interstates and freeways. This seems to be a North American thing, that people will sit in the left lane, and we call them left lane squatters. I think that was the best term that somebody came up with for the video on TikTok, was left lane squatters. They just sit there. And for my friend Tim, who lives on Vancouver Island, the Pat Bay Highway, which runs between the ferries and into Victoria, there are people who get in the left lane and they just drive the speed limit just to upset other people and other drivers on the freeway. So the difference between North America and Europe is that in Europe, you do not sit and drive in that left lane. You will get run over. There is a culture in Europe that you do not drive in that left-hand lane unless you are going very, very much above the posted speed limit. You use it for passing, and then you get back over to the right. So that is one difference between cultures in North America and cultures in Europe. Okay, but all of the other characteristics of freeways and motorways and interstates are the same. Continuity lines, lines dividing lanes of traffic, and those types of things, they're the same. Motorways are the same all over the world. I talked about in the introduction with lane splitting. With motorcycles in California, it's legal to lane split, and all the other 48 states, it's illegal to lane split. But it's lane splitting all over Europe and in Britain and in London. And as I said, it makes motorcycles and scooters more visible. And because they're more visible and they're in the consciousness of the driving public, it makes motorcycle riders safer because drivers are looking for motorcycles. They know that they're going to lane split. They're going to come up between the lanes of cars. They're going to sit in front of the vehicles. So I would argue that we need to get those 48 states to allow lane splitting to reduce traffic fatalities and crashes with motorcycles. Because as we say about motorcycles, there are no fender benders on a motorcycle. There are no crumple zones on a motorcycle. Double parking, New York City. If you go to New York City, double parking is a thing. If you go to some of the other cities in the United States of America, Los Angeles, Chicago, double parking. One of the things about Madrid, Barcelona, this is not something that I saw. This was not something part of their driving culture, was double parking. They would park in no parking zones to unload and load, but they would not, for the most part, I didn't see any double parking when I was in Europe. Okay, police and emergency crews. There's a lot of these in the larger metropolitan areas. And if you're learning how to drive, you're going to be dealing with police and emergency crews a lot. Now, in North America, we're supposed to move over to the right. Sometimes people don't. In Europe, I didn't notice people moving over a lot in terms of response to emergency vehicles. Okay, so some of the driving cultures, some of the different things that you're going to deal with and experience in different places. If you go to the state of New Jersey, the Garden State in the US, you're going to find something called jug handles, which eliminates left-hand turns across oncoming traffic. Roundabouts, as I said, in North America, we're beginning to see these appear on the driving landscape. They are part and parcel of driving in Europe and Australia and other countries in the world. U-turns. There are states in the US where U-turns are something that people do all the time. Here on the west coast of Canada, it's not something that we do, not something that happens a lot, but U-turns are another part of driving culture. Double parking and jaywalking. We have a lot of jaywalking here where I live. There's a lot of jaywalking in most of the cities that I've been in. When I was in Spain, in Barcelona, Madrid, people didn't jaywalk. And it might have something to do with the sheer amount of cars, and as well, the one time that I was kind of walking along the roadway because the sidewalk was very narrow, I got a very stern look from a driver that I was not supposed to be on the roadway. So that's not something that happens. So one of the things, if you are going to drive in different places, you're going to drive in different places in the United States of America, or you're going to go to Europe or Australia, be flexible, improvise, adapt, overcome, because driving is driving. There are some minor differences. The right of way is never taken. It's always given. And even driving on the left, as I intimated in the beginning, it's really not that difficult if there's other traffic on the roadway. Once traffic becomes congestion, and I've noticed this, it doesn't matter where I've lived in the world, the more congestion there is, the less space there comes, traffic slows down and moves through it. And that's the way that happens in these larger roundabouts when people are jockeying for space and those kinds of things. So know that. Okay, so good luck on your driver's test. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. So Mallory, my friend, is here from Nova Scotia. Drive Smart BC. Tim is here, and my friend Joe is here from Toronto. Drive Smart BC, if you're in the province of British Columbia, check out Tim's website. Excellent information if you want to know anything about traffic safety, policing, decisions in courts here in the province, and an excellent forum over there if you want to ask questions of other experts and authorities in the field of traffic safety. So check that out. Tim says people are people, and some days we're all idiots, which is true. We all are emotional. We all have things that affect us when we do certain things, such as driving, for example. So all of that happens. All right, Connor is here. Hey Rick, my friend Ariel showed me your videos and I'm from Vernon, haha, so your videos helped so much for my road test I passed first time. That is awesome. And Ariel is a great person. We did some videos. She probably showed those to you as well. Tim, you are most welcome. David is here. My friend Sat Ann is here, and hopefully I'm going to get over to Europe and we're going to do some videos together. That would be terrific. Awesome. So, any questions about passing a driver's test, becoming a safer, smarter driver, or starting a career as a truck or bus driver? We can help you with all of those questions, and we're going into the busy time of the year with road tests. Students, high school students are going to be off on summer vacation. So June, July, August, first couple of weeks of September, it's going to get busy, and we'll do the best we can to help you out and to ensure that you pass first time. Connor, why are some key things to safety on a highway I may not think of? Space management, Connor, is probably your most important thing in terms of staying safe on the highway, looking far down the road and managing space. Make sure you have that kind of 3 to 4 second following distance. And of course, know the other thing about, especially here in British Columbia where we live in the mountains, this also applies to Idaho, Montana, California, Oregon, Washington State, all in the Rocky Mountains, that trucks are going to slow down on hills. So if you can get around and pass them, know that as well. Trucks, when they get below 40 miles an hour, 70 kilometers an hour, they're going to activate their four-way flashers to indicate to other traffic that they are in fact going slow. Thank you, Mallory, for the Happy Father's Day. That's awesome. Tim, rules are not the same everywhere. One would think we should be the same across North America, but we are not. Yes, I understand. One of the issues with exactly what Tim just said about the fact that the rules aren't the same across North America, because they're not. There are minor differences between states and provinces. For the most part, the rules are the same, but there are minor differences. Those minor differences come from the fact that traffic laws are generated by the state. Traffic laws are generated by the province. They're not under the federal jurisdiction of creating traffic laws. And in Canada, it gets more complicated by the fact that drink driving is charged under the Criminal Code of Canada, and most traffic laws are under the provincial legislation. So that's where it gets complicated. And I was watching videos the other day about lane splitting, because I'm very interested in lane splitting now. It's kind of a topic that I'm thinking about. And California is the only state in the U.S. that allows motorcycles to lane split. It's illegal in the other 48 states to lane split. And this is one of the things I'm going to talk about in the presentation. I believe that lane splitting not only reduces traffic congestion within cities and other urban areas, lane splitting makes motorcyclists safer in cities because they're more visible to other traffic. So when you're driving in cities where lane splitting is allowed, you're able to see motorcycles like, oh my God, they're coming up between us. They expect that. The motorcycles are sitting at the front of the queue at the traffic light. So because they're more visible, they're in the consciousness of drivers. Whereas if they're just sitting in traffic like a normal vehicle, they're not as pronounced, they're not in the consciousness of the kind of driving public. And this is one of the things that I found in Spain. So thanks, Corey, for asking that question. Lane splitting is where the motorcycles move up between the lanes of traffic and move up to the front of the queue and then proceed at the traffic light when it turns green. And the reason for that is because motorcycles and scooters have greater acceleration than cars, so they can take off first. And it just, in my mind, yes, people think, oh, it's dangerous because they're moving through between the lanes of traffic and those types of things. I disagree. There are two benefits of that. And my friend here, Big Mac Sam, happy Father's Day to all the great dads out there. Yes, indeed. Tim says dangerous driving and criminal negligence are federal as well. Okay, so that's good to know that there are other aspects of driving that fall under federal regulation. And I'm sure that's the same in the United States as well, that there are certain violations under traffic. It used to be called vehicular manslaughter, but it's not called vehicular manslaughter anymore because juries were reluctant to convict under that charge. So they changed it to another name. Good point. And rules change over time. At one time, it was illegal to turn right on a red light all over Quebec. Now it's illegal in, actually, Joe, it's Montreal Island. In Montreal, that's the only place. Same thing with the United States. It's New York City, and it's 5 boroughs. So it's Manhattan, Queens, Bronx, Brooklyn, and Staten Island that it's illegal to turn right on a red light. Every other place you can turn right on a red light so long as signs don't prohibit that. Evan, on narrow roads, if there are parked vehicles driving in the middle of the road starting when you're no closer than 2 car lengths, have a part from a parked car so you don't get too close before moving. Yes. Sadan, you haven't driven a truck there yet? No, I haven't driven a truck in Europe. I did notice, though, Sadan, that the trucks were pretty much all the same. They're all cab overs. They all have triple axle trailers. They all have dual rear axles on the truck. There isn't a lot of different configurations. It's not like here in North America, especially here on the west coast of Canada where we live, where we have 2 trailers. They have different kinds of 2 trailers. All the trucks in Europe seem to be pretty much the same configuration. And the reason, and I know the reason for that, is because you're moving into these old imperial cities. There isn't a great deal of space, and you have to get these vehicles around in these very tight spaces, and you have to be able to get them in and get them back out again. So there isn't a lot of room for a lot of variation in terms of the size of the commercial vehicles that are moving up and down the roadways and whatnot. Principal, Rick, at an intersection, how many times should you look in your rearview mirror and wing mirror to turn? Should it be 1 time or multiple times? If you look too much, you'll miss the turn. Yeah, you want to be aware of when you're turning. As you're approaching, you want to do a couple of shoulder checks, one approximately half a block and then one immediately before. It's going to be more observation depending on how long you are at the intersection, how much is going on at the intersection. Is it a complex intersection? Is it an intersection in a residential area that's not that busy? It's going to depend on how much activity is happening at the intersection, about how much observation you're going to need to do to safely maneuver that. Sadan says in some European countries, 2 trailers are legal. So yes. And now Sadan, when you say 2 trailers are legal, is it 2 trailers just on the freeways, and then they have a staging area where they unhook and then they pull one in and then they go back and get the other one? Is that what they're doing there? Tyler, in India, they will pass on a blind quarter and risk a head-on collision driving in India. You need some blood pressure. Yeah, and Tyler, it's no different in China. When I was in China, it was some years ago now that I was in China, but same thing. They'll pass going up a hill and they'll pass on the right side on the shoulder of the road, doing things that are what we would consider extremely dangerous. And they are dangerous because in these places, not only are vulnerable road users, the number of deaths among vulnerable road users extremely high, but the crash rates are very high as well compared to the United States, Scandinavian countries, Europe, Canada, and other places in the world, because they don't have a well-established traffic management system. And this is the reason that these kinds of things happen. Sadan says all roads where trucks are allowed in cities and freeways. Joe, I learned to drive while I was living in Montreal. When I moved back here to Toronto, everyone seemed to drive like little old ladies. A little bit more law-abiding, though, compared with Montreal, my impression. Every place is going to have its culture. Every place is going to seem a little bit different, a little more crazy. Montreal is going to be a little bit different because there are a lot of people in Montreal. You know, there's just a lot more traffic. I would argue there's a lot more people in Montreal than there are in Toronto, and there's more freeways and whatnot. So it's all happening. It's all going on there, right? Banaga, thank you so much for the super chat. I have your G license in August. Speed of highways will be 80 kilometers an hour. Can you give me some advice? Thanks. Okay, so it's going to be 80 kilometers an hour or the flow of traffic, whichever is less. Okay, as well, practice in and around the test center where you're going to be taking your test at the time you're going to be taking your test. So if your test is on Thursday at 10 a.m. in the morning, make sure that you're practicing around the MTO at 10 o'clock in the morning to be able to take your test. As well, If you are not taking driving lessons already, book one driving lesson with a driving instructor so that they can go out and they will take you on the test route where you're going to be taking your test as well. They'll give you feedback on your skills and abilities, and those abilities and skills that need to be strengthened for you to be successful on your driver's test. I can't emphasize enough the excellent return on investment of having one driving lesson with a driving instructor. I took the Ohio maneuverability test and it was much better than actual parallel parking for me. And yes, it was. That's great. And you know, if you've had a little bit of practice at the Ohio maneuverability test, it's going to improve your overall driving. This is the piece that I want to emphasize for all new drivers. I know that parallel parking is not sexy. I know that it's a pain in the butt. I know that 3-point turns are a pain in the butt, that all of these backing into a parking space, it's all a pain in the butt to learn. However, these slow speed maneuvers are going to improve your overall driving. And if you focus on these slow speed maneuvers, you work on some of the exercises for beginner drivers, it's going to improve your overall driving. You are going to be a better driver faster. Not driving faster, but your skills are going to improve at an exponential rate. It's like if you learn how to play piano. If you focus on scales every day for 20 minutes or half an hour, you're going to learn to play the piano faster. It's the same thing if you learn to play football or another sport. If you work on the drills, you're going to be a better player faster. Know that, okay? Drone, thank you so much for the super chat. That's awesome. Your videos helped me pass my road test. Congratulations, my friend. That is great news. Thank you so much for stopping back and letting us know, and for the super chat. Awesome, awesome, my friend. What did you do to go and celebrate passing your driver's test? Beninga, thank you so much. I'm ready to have my license. Can I go 5 kilometers an hour over the speed limit? Excellent question. Speed control is tied into your forward scanning pattern. You're looking far down the road, in center mirror, far down the road, both shoulders, in, checking your instrument panel, down the road, left wing mirror, down the road, right mirror. And you're going to do that, repeat that every kind of 10 to 15 seconds. So every 10 to 15 seconds, you're checking your instrument panel. Every 10 to 15 seconds, you're adjusting your speed. Your speed control or your speed management is tied directly to your observation. So know that for the purposes of your driver's test. It's not a matter of going 5 over. It's a matter of how long you go 5 over without adjusting your speed. If you go too long, you're going to not be successful in your test because you're not adjusting your speed, which tells the examiner that you're not observing correctly for the purposes of your driver's test. Abigail, why some states do not have parallel parking? Example, California. Abigail, you still need to learn how to parallel park. In Los Angeles, you're going to have a pretty tough time if you can't parallel park. However, they've put other slow speed maneuvers on the driver's test that are required in place of parallel parking. So in the state of California, for example, you have to back up 50 feet along the curb instead of parallel parking. The state of Oregon does that as well on some driver's tests, that you have to back up 50 feet along the curb. The trick with backing up 50 feet along the curb is that you have to stay out from the curb approximately 3 feet so that you have some wiggle room, so when you're adjusting and reversing that you're not going to bang into the curb, because if you bang into the curb, most examiners are going to count that as an automatic fail. So know that for the purposes of backing up along the curb. The only other state that I'm aware of that doesn't parallel park is Maryland. Maryland makes you do 2-point reverse turn, which is basically backing around a corner. So Maryland, Ohio, California, and sometimes Oregon are the only states that I'm aware of that don't parallel park. Now, if you go on the internet, there's a bunch of other states that are listed by some sources, but I don't know how competent they are in terms of whether, in fact, these states don't parallel park. But as I said, the only states that I know of are those 4 states. And Oregon, I would still be wary and I would still be prepared to parallel park in the state of Oregon. Okay. Sakina says Florida, but Florida, I've heard lots of students have had to parallel park in the state of Florida. So I wouldn't take that information. I would take that with a grain of salt. I would still make sure that I knew how to parallel park if I was taking my driver's test in the state of Florida. Buify, hi Rick, my road test is coming up in August. I need help on right turns and shoulder checks, please. Corey will put up the video for you on right turns. Shoulder checking, it's simply 90 degrees in the direction that you're moving the vehicle. All right, and also the video on shoulder checking as well. Corey will put that up for you as well, and that will help you out in terms of doing that. Now, if you're having challenges with shoulder checking, and I know that when some new drivers are shoulder checking, what's happening is the car is going in the direction that they're looking. The reason for that is because you're taking too long. You're looking and then the car starts to go in the direction that you're looking. So it's a quick shoulder check. It's like 90 degrees. It's like a millisecond that you're looking and then back. You're not looking for anything when you're shoulder checking. What you're doing is you're getting your peripheral vision, which is 180 degrees in a healthy adult, and you're moving your head so that you have this field of sight. Your peripheral vision is attracted to light and movement. So if there's something moving over here, a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a motorcycle rider, then what happens is you moved, you catched it, oh, there's something there, and then you look again and you figure out what it is, and then you respond to whatever you saw over there. So that's the reason for shoulder checking. And I've had people ask me why we shoulder check when we're driving up to the intersection, because didn't we see it when we're driving up? No, not necessarily, because you may arrive at the intersection, you stopped, and then the pedestrian stepped off the curb beside your car and was kind of walking around because you had a weird position or whatever the traffic situation was. Or a cyclist rode up because you blocked the bicycle lane for whatever reason, and they're up here on this side, and you decided that you're going to move that way a little bit. Well, you need to check. So shoulder checking, you're looking into your blind areas around your vehicle. Thank you so much for all of your fantastic questions. Really, really awesome. Congratulations if you passed your driver's test in the last couple of weeks. And if you have a driver's test coming up, good luck on that.
With the Smarter Driver podcast, we provide the stepping stones towards your success in driving. We empower you to achieve your goals and aspirations as they relate to getting your first license, becoming a safer, smarter driver, or starting a career as a truck or bus driver. If you're just starting out and working towards getting your first license, be sure to check out the Smarter Driver course package down in the description. Guaranteed to pass first time. As well, if there's something about driving that just really irks you and you'd like to get it off your chest, please leave a comment. I'm your host, Dr. Rick August. Thanks very much for listening. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great day. Bye now.